introducing our second panel, which is on that program. I forgot the exact word. But I know it's glimpses of the future. I'm sorry, it's glimpses of humanity, Judy Natal's Future Perfect and Beyond. I want to say a few words by way of a biographical introduction to Judy Natal. She's an amazing landscape photographer by training and expertise, a Chicago-based artist, professor of photography and coordinator of the graduate program at Columbia College, author of Earthworms in 2004, and Neon Boneyard, Las Vegas A to Z, 2006, and then most recently, this book. It's not actually published.
I'm looking for a publisher.
She's looking for a publisher for this book, the prototype of which I'm holding in my hand, and there are other wonderful takeaways of her work up here as well too. Her photographs are in permanent public and private collections at the California Museum of Photography, the Center for Creative Photography, the International Museum of Photography and Film at the George Eastman House, the Museum of Contemporary Photography and the Museum of Contemporary Art in Chicago, the Bibliothèque Nationale de France, and the Museum of Art Sao Paulo, among many others. And of course her work has been exhibited at far too many places for me to mention here. But she's also been awarded many artist residencies, nationally and internationally, most recently in Iceland, the Robotics Institute at Carnegie Mellon, and Biosphere 2, where she established an artist residency program to invite artists to create a cultural response to this man-made wonder of the world. In 2012, Future Perfect was established as a permanent archive at the Center for Art and Environment, the Nevada Museum of Art, which houses the largest landscape photography collection in the world. And I just want to say as well, we were just talking about this, how important and honored we are to have artists of your caliber with us, and it's so important, I think, for this initiative, which has many roots and much strength in the humanities and social sciences, also to involve the arts in a profound way. That's always been part of our understanding of what the mission of CENHS was about. And I'll also, just because I can't help but saying thanks to another living creature next to me here, to Morton, who has been just, I think, one of the most brilliant and stalwart supporters of everything we've done this year. He's been involved in almost everything we've done, and you know how busy he is, and to take so much time is really a gift for us. So Tim Morton will be giving a commentary following Judy Natal's presentation, and then again, we'll open it again to discussion and commentary until 6 o'clock, at which point we'll move the conversation out into the lobby and enjoy over a glass of wine. So Judy, if I can turn the floor over to you.
Thank you. I have this.
Yes, you do.
Okay. Well, I want to say hello to everybody and let you know it's a little nerve-wracking speaking to you. This is sort of a little out of my comfort zone. So I hope you'll bear with me. So I want to thank Timothy Morton and Joe Campana because he was so gracious to me I was here last month. Ellen Broges because she's a wonder of the world herself, and of course Dominic Boyer for making my participation in Cultures of Energy possible. Assuredly, this will have a profound impact on my work, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to share and engage. As a lover of the serendipity of the old card catalog, search engine algorithms can be quite entertaining. As I was preparing this presentation, I typed in glimpses of humanity, and Google served up gorgeous glimpses of calamity, and, which I seem most appropriate for our topic at hand. I will be sharing 3 recent bodies of work with you, so it's going to be a really fast ride, so I hope you'll bear with me. While researching information for my work around ideas of the apocalypse in art, I came across this quote by David Hicks: "When the thin veneer of civilization is stripped away and all hope is lost, what remains is a true glimpse of humanity at its worst and best, and the question, what makes us human, leaps to the forefront of existence." This kernel, this glimpse of humanity is at the very core of my art practice. How does art find hope through awareness, knowledge, social engagement, and our own humanity? The question, what makes us human, is a constant nagging question that is ever present in my work. I enjoy the collision of odd intersections of humor with controversy while deciphering areas of inquiry that are potentially deemed too wacky, too improbable, and too speculative to be real science. Future Perfect is a 5-year project that entails a photographic suite of 3 peculiarly evocative sites where human intervention and land use are exploring the quality and state of futurity, post-nature and post-human. A Las Vegas desert preserve that provides a highly fabricated vision for a sustainable future, biosphere tubes, exploration of controlled ecosystems, and space colonization in Oracle, Arizona. And Iceland's geothermal landscapes are worlds apart from each other, but become perfect foils to imagine what the landscapes of the future might look like. I portray these sites as indications of our future, illuminating the present moment and the choices we have yet to make. Two vital goals define this project. My first ambition is to look at the big picture, to connect the dots between the cause and effect relationships of climate change, to examine the layers of complexity without being dogmatic, since, as you know, we're all implicated. Instead, I want to empower the viewer to enact change, to ask questions, and to be enlivened by the journey, not diminished by it. Sparked by curiosity and the best storytelling known as science fiction, to simply ask the viewer to imagine, along with me, how future landscapes might look, where and how we will live, and what our children's quality of life will be. Drought, soil erosion, air quality, loss and extinction of biodiversity, among many other issues, are pressing. Future Perfect aspires to bring them into focus in relationship to each other. A photograph has a remarkable ability to describe the surface of the scene that is in front of the lens. My role as artist is more the role of weaver of a tapestry than singular thread, weaving together a variety of genres of photography, landscape, portrait, still life, as well as video, sculpture, collage, and sound, to allude to the complexities and interrelationships of subject and content, like the ecosystems illustrations of National Geographic that I loved as a child. These cross-sections depict slices of life systems that become perfect metaphors for my work as I aspire to reveal both the forces that shape the surface of the earth that we cannot see and only imagine, while beautifully depicting fragile and threatened landscapes that we can see. For me, making a photograph is more creating an act of interpretation than a document of what is in front of the lens. I am often asked if my photographs are manipulated digital constructions, but they are not, since I truly believe that life is stranger than fiction. Photographs are all about the here and now. They locate the who, what, where, when, why for a viewer. However, the design for this work was to do the opposite, to displace the viewer rather than place them, and invite them to ask, where am I, why am I here, and has my life changed? In the book, Artists Reclaim the Commons, Susan Bodker writes, for many social and environmental problems, what is lacking is not scientific research or technical knowledge. It is social imagination and the ethical will to envision and enact changes in our ways of living. I seek out landscapes as sites of exploration and imagination that can sustain a visual dialogue that encompass wonderment and horror, hope and fear, love and hate, attraction and repulsion. And what better place to explore these myriad binary contradictions than Las Vegas, which for me embodies all of these emotions. The Las Vegas Springs Preserve is a public-private venture built to teach sustainable living in the desert. This historic site was stripped down to dirt, removing every rock, boulder, shrub, and plant to reimagine the landscape, utilizing fake rock, non-indigenous plants. 7 green architecture buildings were constructed in order to construct a, quote, real landscape that I call a facade of environmental sustainability. For more than 15,000 years, the springs broke through the desert floor, creating grassy meadows and a natural oasis that historically provided indigenous peoples and then early settlers the vital water needed to survive the Great Basin, the harshest desert in North America. Where there is precious water, there is precious life in the desert. Most of the place is fake. Fake rocks, fake trees, fake ground, constructed by highly specialized construction workers, rock fabricators, and meticulous lichen painters. I photographed over a 6-month period of intense construction, and to my amazement and dismay, the artifice that was clear at the beginning progressed until it was practically seamless and invisible, and eventually looked normal in my photographs. In June 2007, I toured the magical kingdom-like Biosphere 2 while attending a wedding in Tucson, and it was truly love at first sight. Here, a wild band of artists turned visionaries posing as scientists, presumed to be a cult with the requisite sex, drugs, and Timothy Leary, funded and continues to be funded to the present day by one very rich Texas oil billionaire. Perhaps, I'm hoping somebody in the audience knows him, Ed Bass. Rumor has it that drugs were strategically hidden while building Biosphere 2, and that wild treasure hunts ensued once B2 was sealed up. And for 2 years, the 8 Biosphereans almost killed each other trying to sustain life, their own, while exploring the possibility of space colonization within this man-made mini-Earth. Biosphere 2 remains the largest closed system in the world, housing 5 ecosystem biomes, consisting of ocean with coral reef and wave machine, tropical rainforest, mangrove wetlands, savanna grasslands, and a fog desert, as well as an intensive agricultural biome, apartments, and mission control. Tunnels run to separate outbuildings that house 2 lungs that breathe for the structure, allowing all of the 6,600 geodesic glass panels to expand and contract with the rise and fall of temperatures in the beautiful desert surroundings of the Canyon del Oro. In 2011, I created an open studio at Biosphere 2 while I proof-printed and sequenced this work for a book. This was the product of that. It was here that a more profound exchange occurred between artist and participant on a daily basis, far from art galleries, where up to several hundred tourists a day from around the globe encountered my work. And I heard, quote, "You know, I never really thought about the future a lot." I also taught an Imagining the Future workshop, which ran the gamut from graduate students from the University of New Mexico's Art Plus Ecology program to visitors to B2 of all ages, where we drew, painted, and collaged about the future. The last site I sought out were the minimalist extreme landscapes of Iceland, which became the perfect foil to imagine the end, or rather, a new beginning of the world. Future Perfect weaves 5 narrative threads together while traveling backwards in time from 2040 to 2010. The narrative threads consist of the steam portraits, the landscapes, public art that expresses fears and anxieties about the future, the automobile as 20th century icon, and kids' drawings representing the generations to come. Will the land be laid to waste as so many science fiction novels and films depict, or will we harness the power of our imaginations, energy, and human potential, building vertical farms, taming humanity's proclivity toward modern violence, replenish and repair water, soil, air quality, and imbalances in the natural world? Every human being on the face of the earth, present and future generations, have equal rights to a clean and livable environment. Will the future be a utopic experience or a dystopic one? An artist byproduct of Cape Farewell, an organization that brings together artists and scientists to create a cultural response to climate change, and who I became acquainted with when I put together a panel called The Big Picture, Art, Efficacy, and Climate Change, of which Timothy Morton brilliantly participated, was a book, Solar, by Ian McEwan, and it was satire. It is a satire about a jaded Nobel-winning physicist whose dysfunctional personal life and cynical ambition see him pursuing a solar energy based solution for climate change. The very unlikable main character, Michael Beard, stands in for Western society's gluttony and overconsumption when he voyages to the Norwegian Arctic island of Spitsbergen. The novel is based on an actual 2005 trip McEwan made with Cape Farewell. He later said of the trip, "In the evenings we had passionate, idealistic discussions about climate change and how we should live. If you're going to write about climate change, you're going to have to write about human nature and how we have these bold ambitions for ourselves, and yet daily life and our own souls overwhelm us." He went on to say, "The heart of the problem of climate change is that we are really struggling with our own natures to do favors with people who will never meet. In other words, our great-great-grandchildren. And it's not the nature of human traits to do favors with people you don't yet know. Tom Lombardo states in his essay, Science Fiction as the Mythology of the Future, states, because H.G. Wells saw the future in evolutionary terms, he saw the possibility for unending human progress, but also the potential for disaster, if not total extinction. The future of humanity was uncertain, for within an evolutionary framework, there is no purpose or ultimate goal to nature, and humanity is not some special creation by God, but just one among many species in the ongoing struggle for survival. Species survive by adapting to the changing circumstances of the environment, and there is no guarantee that humanity will adapt and flourish into the future. Wells created both utopian visions of the future where humankind uses reason, science, and humanitarian ethics to guide its future, and nightmarish, troubling, and dystopian visions where negative and self-destructive trends dominate in our future history. Given the uncertainty of the evolutionary saga, the future of humanity is a double-edged sword of both hope and fear. The world is no longer a creation of God's. It is an evolutionary process involving the possibilities of both unending advancement and total extinction. Dr. Adam Corner in The World Won't Listen in The New Scientist writes, there are many reasons why the rational arguments of science and economics have failed to win the day, but an important one concerns human nature. Through a growing body of psychological research, we know that scaring or shaming people into sustainable behavior is likely to backfire. We know that it is difficult to overcome psychological distance between the concept of climate change here, not now, and people's everyday lives. There's a great deal of resistance toward the idea that communication about climate change requires more than explaining the science. Our, quote, our world, our old world that we have inhabited for the last 12,000 years has ended, even if no newspaper in North America or Europe has yet printed its scientific obituary, Mike Davis states in 2008. So where did the artists fit in? Gary Hume, who also was a participant in Cape Farewell's Arctic voyage, acknowledged painful contradictions. The people who do the most environmental damage by my work, and I'm not using ecologically sound paint. I feel like apologizing. I can't help the world. Climate change is too big for my art. My paintings are small things. But there are many roles artists play: soothsayer, trickster, chronicler, fortune teller, time traveler, explorer, archaeologist, scientist, while creating acts of interpretation that explain what we know and what we don't, portray our hopes and fears about life on Earth, and explore our place in the universe. But the one role that an artist plays more than any other is that of messenger, the bearer of a verbal, visual, or written communication that foreshows or foretells through notices and invitations from one person to another and to the culture at large. Lucy Lepard, curator of Weather Report, Art and Climate Change, writes, quote, there is no reason to exaggerate the elusive power of art. Artists cannot change the world alone, but when they make a concerted effort, they collaborate with life itself, working with and between other disciplines and audiences, and given the chance to be seriously considered outside the rather narrow world of art, they can offer visual jolts and subtle nudges to conventional knowledge. At best, they can make the hot breath of climate change both vivid and immediate to this visually oriented society, and they can inform us in the process. They can also deconstruct the ways we are manipulated by the powers that be. Rod Slemons, in his essay Unfold Art in Action, concludes, quote, those of us in the arts community might also take this as a direct charge to figure out a path to inclusion and clarity for climate change subjects. It might create a rare instance of art actually changing somebody's mind and causing them to act. In 2005, Bill McKibben wrote an essay on risk.org entitled, What the Warming World Needs Now is Art, Sweet Art, where he chastised artists by stating that climate change is not a part of our culture. Where are the books, the poems, the plays, the goddamn operas? When people someday look back on our moment, the single most significant items will doubtless be the sudden spike in temperatures, but they'll have a hell of a time figuring out what it meant to us, especially since there's no real chance of a happy ending. But there also needs to be hope as well, visions of what it might feel like to live on a planet where somehow we use this moment as an opportunity to confront our consumer society, use it to begin the process of rebuilding community. They don't have to be romantic visions, though, a little romance wouldn't hurt. It may be well that because no one stands outside the scene, no one has the distance to make art from it. But we've got to try. Art, like religion, is one of the ways we digest what is happening to us, make the sense out of it that precedes action. Otherwise, the only role left to us, noble but also enraging in its impotence, is simply to pay witness. Time rushes on in ways that humans have never before contemplated. We can register what is happening with satellites and scientific instruments, but we can register it in our imaginations that most sensitive of all our devices. Flash forward to 2009, where Bill McKibben took to risk.org again with an essay titled, 4 years after my pleading essay, Climate Art is Hot. Quote, artists, in a sense, are the antibodies of the cultural bloodstream. They sense trouble early and rally to isolate and expose and to defeat it, to bring to bear the human power for love and beauty and meaning against the worst results of carelessness and greed and stupidity. So when art of great worth and in great quantities begins to cluster around an issue, it means that civilization has identified it finally as a threat. This is Buckminster Fuller's Dome over Manhattan photo collage done in 1960. Artists and scientists perform this function most reliably. Politicians are a lagging indicator. That famous picture of the Earth from outer space that Apollo beamed back in the late 1960s, already that's not the world we inhabit. Its poles are melting, its oceans rising. Photographer James Bellog, in his ongoing project, Extreme Ice Survey, is providing an unprecedented amount of imagery and data as never before regarding the demise of the glaciers globally. This image is of the Solheim Glacier in Iceland, which depicts where this glacier was at the start of my project in 2007 and where it is today. I can attest to the demise of this glacier, having spent 5 summers in Iceland photographing on it, and it is more unrecognizable each time I return. My project, Robot City Uncanny Valley, is the next logical step of Future Perfect, where I imagine how we will live in the future. Robot City imagines what we will look like in the future. Robots are symbolic synthesis of humanity and machine. They personify our fears of science and technology, as well as our fear of what we may become in our attempt to create life like Frankenstein. We fear our own creations may turn on us. We may destroy ourselves through our machines, or worse, we may become machines. While contemplating humanoid robots, I explore our range of emotional responses, from aversion to love, as we increasingly interact with machines in our own image. The resulting photographs and videos challenge and assuage our ideas about what it means to be human and the inevitability of our now shared evolutionary path with machines. Like Biosphere 2, robotics originated in the realms of magicians, visionaries, and science fiction and theater, but has now emerged as the moral and visual compass of what it means to be human, and sustains and intensifies by ongoing exploration and contemplation of human nature. Robot City is the result of an ongoing residency at the Robotics Institute. Here I engage with roboticists, theorists, researchers, and leading designers in the field to explore the moral territory surrounding design and construction of humanoid robots, driverless cars, biomimicry that attempts to transform the world by emulating nature's designs, and where interplanetary machines are tested to explore quality of life issues in the not-so-distant future, both for able-bodied as well as compromised human beings. Our children are now being taught in kindergarten how to build robots that are benign and beloved, made from craft materials like pipe cleaners, googly eyes, and construction paper. They are being taught that they can design and build their own best friends. Being a human is far easier than building a human. The 10 hardest things to teach a robot to do is navigation, exhibit dexterity, hold a conversation, acquire new skills, deception, which requires imagination, anticipate human actions, coordinate activities with another robot to work as a team, make copies of itself, i.e. have sex, act based upon ethical principles, and lastly and most importantly, feel emotions. I play with how quickly robotics can tip into science fiction. I am interested in technologists' refusal to examine moral and ethical issues which might interfere with speedy problem solving and lucrative funding opportunities, even if suspect from corporate government agencies. Robotic technology is so pervasive and yet so overlooked it's hiding in plain sight. Our attitudes toward machines have evolved from resistance to resignation and ultimately acceptance in what is called the second industrial revolution. This is the second iteration of her, what you're looking at, who starred in the famous Oreo cookie and cream ad on TV and the YouTube sensation. If you haven't seen it, you should Google it. It's really hilarious. By reenacting nature's designs, we come to better understand the world around us as well as ourselves. I depict breaking machines and the rush of empathy to repair them, paternal patience necessary to program, while human-scale photographic prints explore our contradictory fears of invasion, relief from isolation, and relational desires offered up by sex bots, robotic baby and geriatric sitters, killing machines and exoskeletons that encourage voluntary amputation of able-bodied limbs. Ultimately, we will view humanoid robots as intelligent social and moral beings, allowing us to develop substantial and meaningful relationships with these machines as we progress along an evolutionary timeline increasingly entwined. At once troubling and enlightening is the shadowy partnership with DARPA, which it seems like everybody, of course, here knows who they are. And they're responsible for the development of new technology used by the military and reports directly to Senior Department of Defense Management. Graham Templeton exclaims, "Today DARPA is the nerd wonderland agency in a nerd wonderland era." The media fondly refers to DARPA as the Pentagon's mad scientist, and who hasn't at some point dreamed of being a mad scientist? Social robots will leap over the divide of the uncanny valley, once a huge obstacle in human-robot relations, as we become increasingly dependent and accustomed to human-machine interaction. Quote, ask yourself the question, why is Google buying up all the robotics companies and artificial intelligence experts? Brooke Gladstone queried in her excellent radio program last Sunday that was a short primer on all issues robotics. New York Times film critic Manola Dargis, in her very recent review of Transcendence, writes, quote, for all its topical gloss and technobabble, it also draws from older familiar preoccupations about the nature of being. However predictable and ridiculous, the film raises the questions of what, as the machines rise, makes us human and why. And lastly, I want to share with you another storm is coming. Started last January, and it begins in and around New Orleans post-Katrina as a premonition of that imagines a decidedly darker vision of the future, full of ominous warnings and steadily escalating sense of foreboding of impending disaster as the environmental issues become more and more pressing, repetitive, and the need to act more immediate. The title is inspired by a piece of graffiti that I photographed in New Orleans, January 2013, 7 years post-Katrina, at the Six Flags amusement park, abandoned and devastated, where floodwaters and swamp are now reclaiming the park. In a review of the exhibition Earth, Art of a Changing World, Laura Cummings states, all the best environmental art aspires to poetry, not propaganda, by which I mean that their ideas and observations have passed through the filter of the imagination to be transformed into something else, something further. For me, Houston will be forever inextricably linked to New Orleans due to Hurricane Katrina. They are both listed in the top 5 U.S. cities most vulnerable to hurricanes. Houston is ranked number 5 and New Orleans number 2 in the dirtiest cities in the U.S. Houston and New Orleans are, of course, our major energy hubs. The Third Coast has a concentration of energy jobs 5 times the national rate, and these jobs have an average annual salary of over $100,000. Both cities have been impacted by oil spills. In the report, Effectively Addressing Climate Risk Through Adaptation for the Energy Gulf Coast, published by the American Wetlands Foundation and Entergy, a Fortune 500 company with revenues of more than $11 billion, states, quote, "The Gulf Coast is vulnerable to growing environmental risks today, with $350 billion of cumulative expected losses by 2030. Within the Gulf Coast, we should expect a Katrina, Rita type year occurring once every lifetime by 2030. That truly gave me pause. This report cites 3 key climate hazards: sea level rise, wind damage, and storm surges. And I think you will know all that. The Gulf of Mexico offshore energy assets include more than 2,500 active shallow water platforms, 145 active deep water platforms, and 14,000 miles of offshore pipelines. In the last Sunday's New York Times Magazine article, "It's the End of the World as We Know It, and He Feels Fine," about Paul Kingsnorth, author, environmental activist, and founder of the group Uncivilization, explains, "People think that abandoning the belief that if we try hard enough we can fix this mess is a nihilist position. We think we're saying, screw it, nothing matters. But in fact, all we're saying is, let's not pretend we're not feeling despair. Let's sit with it for a while. Let's be honest with ourselves and with each other. And then as our eyes adjust to the darkness, what do we start to notice? In this project, for me, Another Storm is Coming. That is exactly what I'm doing. I'm letting my eyes adjust. Cumulative losses in the Gulf Coast may amount to," I'm going to skip this because we're running late. I found myself asking questions about how we measure human suffering. I created a timeline of environmental disasters beginning in 2007, and it went to 2040 for Future Perfect, tracking economic costs, cost of human life, and environmental costs. And the timeline is 55 feet long. Rebecca Solnit, in her book, A Field Guide to Getting Lost, quotes Thoreau, "Not till we are completely lost or turned around do we appreciate the vastness and strangeness of nature. Not till we are lost, in other words, not till we have lost the world, do we begin to find ourselves and realize where we are and the infinite extent of our relations." I'll share another serendipitous Google moment with you here as I search for images of Roland Barthes, who writes in Camera Lucida, "Ultimately, photography is subversive, not when it frightens, repels, or even stigmatizes, but when it's pensive, when it thinks. Photography is a social medium. Photographs acquire their meaning in the social sphere. And the one thing that has not changed is, as Lucy Lepard states, it is the artist's job to teach us how to see. The true artist helps the world by revealing mystic truths," Bruce Nauman wrote in his Neon piece. Laura Cumming, in her review, states, "I often ask what brings art and science together, and clearly there are many intersections of significance. Curiosity, a love of learning, working from a position of not knowing to knowing, but fundamental commitment to research. But for me, the singular most important thing that art shares with science is that imagination and a profound wonderment of the great mysteries. But before we can unravel these mysteries, our sciences must get past their present limitations. Science needs art. This world of human experience is the world of arts. The novelist and the painter and the poet embrace those ephemeral aspects of the mind that cannot be reduced or dissected or translated into the activity of an acronym. They strive to capture life as it's lived. The power of the human imagination is the ability to surprise and move people, connect with people, and with ourselves in the spaces between what is and what is possible." Thank you.
Okay, so what makes us human? No, actually, as I was listening, I thought, oh, I remember the Richard Dawkins answer to that. It's sweating. I've been doing quite a lot of it. What makes us human? All kinds of non-humans, DNA, skin, gut bacteria, common ancestors, fish swim bladders, which gave us lungs, hospitals, roads, ambulances, classes, art, philosophy, a flaw in cognition that makes it tremendously arduous to think on scales necessary for ecological action, a flaw in logic stemming from the origins of agriculture, a flaw that has now gone viral. Viruses and antiviral agents, the war of escalation between bacteria and antibiotics, cattle, factories, cats who eat the rats who eat the corn that is farmed so as to exclude and eliminate life forms now described as pests, thoughts, sentences, images, oxygen, anxiety, denial, fragility, aggression, mindfulness, awareness, ignorance, total dumbass stupidity, bull in the china shopness, predicting futures, realizing the futurality as such cannot be predicted, the future perfect, which escapes the lockdown of presence and the present, or a horrifying future of perfected anti-life logistics, living in the biosphere, living in biosphere 2, well maybe that's just Judy, I wish I had. The beauty and whimsicality of images of frogs and turtles crowding space impossibly with laughter, like a child's textbook, frighteningly soft, a weird mist descending over a human of unidentifiable race, gender or class in a hazmat suit, or is it just a hazmat suit? Or is it not a human at all? Or is it just a hazmat suit? As if the human enveloped in its orange security blanket were also disappearing behind its manufactured smokescreen. As if an unnatural nature, itself a human product, were wrapping the human in its obliterating miasma. Veils of ignorance, for how long do they descend? That's the trouble with non-humans, they are tricksters. We can never be sure what they are or what they're up to, yet they are so exquisitely themselves. Liquid, pouring like tentacles, springs breaking through a desert floor for 15,000 years, half as long as all of known human history thus far. And humans, they make us human. Children, a painting, an immortized Mona Lisa, an automobile overwhelmed by fossil fuels. Wait a second, is that human or non-human? The boundary is neither thin nor rigid. Judy makes us know that, how things slip into an uncanny valley between categories. Imagination. Is it human? Why would we want it to be? Is imagination unthought thought from the future? Judy seems to think so. So do I. Knowing a thing or two about humans, like humanists, supposedly, or Ian McEwan. Knowing that there are future people and knowing that we must now act with regard to them, what a mockery of utilitarian ethics, thank heavens, or OMG. Fear, shame, as too often used in completely useless ecological goads, the attempt to catch imagination up with what we know, to make some good antibodies against what ails us. But there is always the risk that art will bring other kinds of plague, and that to control these will involve all kinds of violence. Think of a horrible future in which we know that we shouldn't exacerbate our autoimmune disorders like making more life forms extinct because we want civilization with cufflinks and the ability to drive where you want. Yet in that future we have allergies to art and all kinds of antiseptics to wipe it out. A future of proper art. Art is a pest, not just an antibody, and even antibodies can kill their host. Depression is a kind of allergy of the intellect that eventually kills the poor host, if you let it. The initial ecological affect is a feeling of depression, of being surrounded by and permeated by beings that I can't peel off me, of being caught in the headlights of my knowledge and my aggression. Judy Natal and I, and everyone in this room, are terrible pests. We bring a plague called ecological awareness. That's not because we're out to destroy, we're just having a bad allergic reaction to the present, which has been going on for 10,000 years. Brian Eno wanted the future to be like perfume. We want it to be like Benadryl. We want to accept and tolerate the others who make up the human, the otherness installed at the very heart of the human, like a thought or an antibody or enjoyment, and more than tolerate. We want to live this sentence, written by Adorno and channeled by Paul Kingsnorth, channeled by Judy, who will have come from the future to say, not that, Clark. Progress means humanity emerges from its spellbound state, no longer under the spell of progress as well. Its self-nature, by becoming aware of its own indigenous to nature, and by halting the mastery over nature through which nature continues its mastery.